You're welcome to the Vigilant Podcast. I'm Odiawa AI for Veegil Media. With me on the show, we have Elizabeth, and we will be talking about the complex path to democracy. Elizabeth, what say you?
Well, the issue of democracy in Nigeria is actually something that needs to be questioned a lot, because currently there is doubt if we're actually practicing democracy system of government or if it's actually.
Why do you think? Why do you feel we're not actually practicing
the
democracy?
concept of democracy is meant to be government for the people, by the people, and of the people. But currently, over time, we have seen situations whereby the government is acting on behalf of themselves and not on behalf of the people. So I think we really need to question democracy that Nigeria is practicing.
So we can take a cue from the recent rift between state governors and local government chairmen, or state governors and their deputies.
Yes, and also even everything happening, you can also see that democratic system of government is actually not really functioning in the country.
So for democracy now to function now, that means the rule of law is not actually being strictly adhered to.
No, it's not. It's like the law. They said the law is above everybody, but in Nigeria, I really don't think that is actually what is happening, because there are people. Okay, the rule of law actually have its deficiencies in the sense that there are people who are immune to that law. Yes.
But still, they say the law, no one is above the law. And rule of law, for rule of law to actually operate, there's always a constitution in place in any democratic setting. Now, is it the people who actually constitute democratic setting that are actually flouting this constitution, making the democracy to be complex, or maybe making it look as if there's no believability or credibility in any democratic system, particularly Nigeria?
Yeah, I think majorly the people leading us, yes, people in power, and also we the citizens are actually playing a role in making the rule of law look like it's not functioning, and it's looking like the constitution we have in Nigeria is actually not really working. So I feel everybody has their own part to, they have to share from the blame. It's not really just only one sector that should take the blame, either ethnic wise and every other wise.
The show is the Vigilant Podcast. I'm Odiawa AI. With me on the show is Elizabeth. First of all, we will start by revisiting how the nation Nigeria began its democratic journey. Originally, coming from the colonial rule in the 1850s and 60s, Nigeria under the British got amalgamated as at 1914. And upon that amalgamation, it went on for another 20-something years plus, or 30-something, 40-something years plus, before it got its independence in 1960. And now from 1960, to be specific, 3 years later, it became a federal republic. Hence, the commencement of an original democratic setting, or an original democratic journey, because as of 1960, it was still practicing a parliamentary system of government. Now, commencing with the First Republic from 1963, the Second Republic during the Shagari regime, the Third Republic as at Ernest Shonekan, which was an interim government, of course, bringing or ushering in the military government, and then the Fourth Republic, which we are in now currently, which has been the longest, I would say, stable but unstable democratic setting. And why has it been unstable or unstable, if I may use that language? It will be this list of points which I have actually outlined. We'll talk about the geopolitical conflicts, security issues, infrastructural deficiencies, and then lastly, looking on the way forward. We initially began by talking about the rule of law and seeing how the rule of law can actually stand. Is it right to actually flout the rule of law? And where does check and balance apply when it comes to the rule of law? And will the constitution actually speak for itself, or will people speak for it, since democracy is a system of government for the people, by the people? So, Elizabeth, talking about geopolitical conflict now, what will be your own view or opinion about that?
Well, Nigeria is actually one of the countries that has many ethnic groups, over 250 ethnic groups, and each ethnic group, even to today, in various ethnic groups, there is still a struggle and there's still a fight, communal fight. I'm going to cite some instance, like from where I come from in the East. in the Igbo land as we all know them to be. Now, we believe that coming from the same ethnicity group should bring a kind of bond and, a kind of love and unity. But in Nigeria, I think the reverse is the case. Because in most ethnic groups, there is still a segregation happening. And so this is the reason why we can't actually have a democracy that is functioning in our country today. Okay, look at the Igbo land, for instance. We have the Enugu state, we have the Anambra, we have the Ebonyi state. Now, an Enugu man will tell you that an Anambra man is actually different from him, but they all speak a central language. So now, if you look at this, even down to intercommunal clashes, I mean, why should people from the same state be fighting? So I think in the issue of geo-ethnical problem,
geopolitical conflict.
Yes, conflict, you will find that in various ethnicity, there's still problems. So if deep within them, they have this kind of clashes, then when we come to the general surface, I mean, we can't even agree on an issue. As in, an Igbo man will not support his fellow Igbo man. So I feel if this is actually the problem, I mean, if you cannot accommodate your own brother in your house, then how can you relate with an outsider?
So will it now be a case of inferiority complex? Not just inferiority complex or marginalization or excessive over-dominance. Why? Because they feel that that other tribe or that person from that tribe is actually superior to him or her. So this feeling of low self-esteem begins to set in. Let's say, for instance, you're talking about the southeastern part of Nigeria. Yeah. Now, I wish not to point fingers at each tribe. Why? Because as you said, we're all Nigerians. Yes. Now, realizing this fact that we're all Nigerians now, why don't we begin to accommodate each other? Now, it's part of the reasons. Now, this geopolitical conflict is part of what makes a democratic system not to be fully functional. And when it's not fully functional, other people begin to see all these things, and it begins to incite them to begin to do whatever they have to do or misbehave. Before you say Jack, they become a system of anarchy, lawlessness. When they cannot begin to showcase when you can't begin to showcase some stable form of government, it now brings in the military. And bringing in the military now is going to be an authoritarian system. Yeah. It's common knowledge that a particular region of Nigeria majorly is dominant, particularly in key sectors of the military. And that is where marginalization now comes in. Marginalization might not really end up in one region. What do you think?
Okay, my opinion on that is, like you said, you already said some things. I will still cite some instance again. Because we as Nigerians, okay, let me just say this. Let me put it this way. If we trace this back to 1940, when there was a kind of quarrel between Esau Akintola, Obafemi Awolowo, and the rest, I feel the issue of this marginalization or the issue of this geopolitical conflict can be traceable to the time when Nigeria was started. You get? When Nigeria started and before it gained its independence. There has been this conflict, or should I say tribalism. I'm an Igbo, you're a Yoruba. So I feel it might be an issue of pride, okay? An issue of pride. You don't want to succumb to the other person. You feel your opinion is best. So I feel in Nigeria, we are all clamoring for our voice to be heard. Everybody wants to dominate. Everybody wants to be heard. Everybody wants to be seen. And so when the Igbo man is saying yes, the Yoruba man is saying no, the other one is saying, so I feel that is what is actually causing this problem. So when we come to democracy, you find that because everybody is actually having varying opinion and nobody is trying to agree, it affects the country. And that way, the military sees a room for them to intervene. Because, when there is no agreement, I mean, they feel, oh, let's come in and let's do this, since nobody wants to agree. But if we can find a common ground that every tribe can be able to accommodate themselves, they can see eye to eye, and feel this is a common Nigeria. What if dividing the country is actually putting the country in chaos? I mean, is that the way forward for us? Is the military actually the way forward for us?
The military, I would say, is not the way forward, per se. We should look at it that even before the military would come in, there must have been so many other incidences. Let's take, for instance, the First Republic, when Nnamdi Azikiwe was president. Yeah. Aguiyi took over. Yes. In a palace school, if they will call it that way. Yeah, cool. And before you say Jack, not one Igbo foremost leader was touched, but the other regions had their prominent leaders executed in some gruesome manner. making it now look like, okay, you want to assert dominance. We too know how to showcase our dominance. So that is where this geopolitical, and it's repeated itself again in the Second Republic.
Yeah.
But this time around, it had to do with looting.
Yes.
Now, resources, whether from crude oil or whatever, everything is carted from either the south-south or the southeast and blown over to the north. And at the same time, that area now is, because of a sparsely located feature, now is not developed.
Yes.
And this conflict now begins to grow and brew. And the seed of discord now is sown into children yet unborn.
Yeah.
Now, stakeholders now in a democratic setting, I think they should also be sensitized on what ideology are you coming with. They call them the manifestos.
Yeah.
It's not just about coming in on a platform where you're a flag bearer and you say you're becoming a state governor or a president. What manifesto are you actually putting on the table? And are you actually living up to the manifesto upon being elected into office? That is where you will now see a functional democratic system, not a situation whereby you are living on the manifesto of bias from where you are coming from.
Sure.
So moving on, that was what will now dictate these security issues where we now have communal clashes.
Yeah.
Now these communal clashes now, I want to believe you have your own things to say.
Yes, on communal clashes. I mean, we have seen
How they
various,
disrupt the whole democratic setting.
Exactly. I mean, it's actually a really pressing problem that really needs to address and look into. Okay, while I was a student in the Boeing State University, I actually witnessed a lot of communal clashes. And the strangest thing about this is that these people are fighting when they share common grounds. I mean, we are all from the same place and you're fighting for land. I mean, we have seen situations of people fighting for lands, people burning down properties and all that, and lives have been endangered. I mean, this insecurity, insurgency, Boko Haram, farmer headers clashes, going to places, killing people, all these issues actually contribute to the reason why the democracy system in Nigeria is not really functioning. And I feel most people bear grudges. Maybe people from the north feel, oh, our land, okay, I was opportune to go to the north for my orientation service. And I feel to an extent, maybe these people actually, the reason why they are doing this, that the farmer header and the burning and everything, could be from the fact that their region is not experiencing growth. Like, it's not really experiencing growth. And so maybe they feel the only way they can be heard or seen is to, go to places and just, claim possession of those lands so that they can actually develop and grow. And again, most of their lands are not as fertile as when you go to places like maybe Ogun State that is very, very fertile. So it all draws back to the fact that they feel that the resources that have been allocated to them are not enough. So these things lead to communal clashes. A particular town might say, oh, our land is not enough, all right? And these people have enough land. Why not give us from this land? And rather than having a kind of peaceful negotiation, the next way is to go into what? Fighting. And I feel it's not actually the way forward for Nigeria. Why fight our borders when we can actually solve this in, a very nice and smooth way?
So now on that, I would say now we'll take a cue from the communal clash now dictating infrastructural deficiency.
Yeah.
And we talk about infrastructural deficiency. When these clashes occur, it therefore means that lives will be lost, properties will be obliterated.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is it doesn't just end there.
Yeah.
The leaders now in these northern parts now, are they actually psychophants? In the sense that what happened to revenue which has been generated into the federation account and being disbursed to other states? You cannot say a country like Ethiopia that lacks, I'm using Ethiopia now as an example.
Yeah, right.
Ethiopia now lacks natural resources, but they have really, really invested in tourism. So if you come to a place like northern Nigeria now, there are so many tourist attractions, which the lead representatives, I mean by those ones, I mean governors now, can actually capitalize on. And if they capitalize on that, I think revenue can also be generated from there. Not necessarily being dependent on the number one resource, which is crude oil, which everybody is actually killing themselves for.
Exactly.
So now with this infrastructural deficiency now resulting from the communal clashes, it now makes people not to come in and say, okay, for instance, now the US now has labeled some states, particularly northern states, as level 4. And for them to label those states as level 4, it therefore means that those places are high risk zones and their citizens shouldn't go there. Now, for them to label your state on that level, it therefore means that it's a shame, let me put it that way.
A very big
it's
shame.
A very big shame. And you say you are actually practicing democracy. So it is on that note, I will now say rule of law should actually operate in a way whereby no one should act with impunity and get away with it. Because lives are, I take a cue from what you said.
Yeah.
They might have their reasons for having communal clashes, but dialogue will always be the best way forward. But what happens when the dialogue is not adhered to?
But can I say something about the dialogue? You know, in most regions of Nigeria, they're actually not privileged to have access to quality education. And so because of the lack of education, most people, the way they were trained, especially the Northerners, is to fight for something that belongs to them. Now, in most Igbo community, you know the way they train their little kids, and they're like, you know, if you want something, it can go for it this way. So they learned when they were small that the way to get something from their brother is to fight for it. So when a child grows up with that notion into an adult, how do you expect them to think that dialoguing is actually the way forward when the only language they know is to fight or shed blood?
Then we will now say that the system has not actually sensitized its populace on the fact that, okay, violence should not be the means of last resort. Dialogue will always be the best way forward, because there is no action you commit once you're above 18. It's not a case of you're going to be in a juvenile home. You will be responsible, accountable for your actions.
Yeah.
And you cannot begin to give irrational excuses when you're summoned to the law courts. That is why till tomorrow, rule of law will always prevail anywhere, be you busting a pipeline or be you acting for interest under pressure groups to support the interest of a larger community. The rule of law must always prevail. I think that will be the way forward concerning democracy, because if we would look at it, democracy till tomorrow is still the best form of government. As they will say, it is better than the worst, or is better than the best military government. Because in a democratic setting, the rights or liberties of every human being or every individual or citizen is always respected and should be regarded. The path to democracy in Nigeria here has been a complex one. And it's on that note, we will make sure yearnings of each Nigerian, we'll make sure that they are actually adhered to. Voices have been heard before, and voices will continue to be heard. We draw the curtain on today's episode of the Vigilant Podcast. I'm Odiawa AI with Elizabeth. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.